What did the 10th Mountain Division encounter in the Adirondack wilderness in 1999? That still remains classified to this day. It started like any other winter training op. Deep snow, low temps, minimal daylight. The 10th had run dozens of these before. Cold weather warfare, high altitude recon, textbook stuff. But Exercise Winter Forge had one difference. Location. A zone deeper into the Adirondacks than they'd ever used. Near Copper Ridge, remote, frozen, supposedly empty. For the first 36 hours, everything was quiet. Teams moved along preset waypoints. Radios worked, sleds and snowmobiles tracked clean through the backcountry. But then, the signal blackout started. No warning, no static buildup, just silence. 3 squads dropped off comms, one entirely. Emergency pings weren't even bouncing back. Recon satellites captured nothing but heavy cloud mass. Infrared scans returned blurry, inconsistent patterns, like something big and moving. Command assumed a comms malfunction. Nothing new in deep terrain. But then a backup squad sent to check on one of the forward units reported something strange. They didn't find the missing team, just their gear, still arranged around a dead fire. Boot prints, frozen in place like the team had stood up in unison and walked into the trees. No drag marks, no signs of a fight. Just one note logged in the report. Location revised after contact. No one at the time explained what that meant. But that same week, something else happened. A seismic monitor placed on a nearby ridge, standard for snowpack shift warnings, spiked violently. Not an avalanche, not ground settling. A deep, rhythmic tremor, like footfalls, but heavier than any known species. Civilian researchers pulled the data later, said the readings looked almost patterned, measured, deliberate. And here's where it gets darker. The area they blacked out on maps after the incident just happens to sit inside ancient Mohawk territory, a place once called the Land of Stone Giants. Coincidence? Maybe. But in a training log quietly declassified years later, an unnamed ranger wrote this. Thought it was a boulder until it stood up. No name, no rank, just a GPS coordinate. With the final line, target did not engage, observed movement, not alone. Whatever the 10th Mountain Division ran into out there, it wasn't human, and it wasn't alone. Before we move on, if you're into classified missions, hidden encounters, and the kind of stories that never make it to the evening news, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Our mission is to hit 100K subscribers within next year. And you're a big part of that. And watch till the end. If you believe legends don't vanish, they just learn to hide. Now, back to the story. What did the 10th Mountain Division encounter in the Adirondack wilderness in 1999 that still remains classified to this day? That's not a campfire story. It's a real question. One that starts with a strange assignment. February 1999, upstate New York. The Adirondack Mountains were blanketed in snow thick enough to drown sound. A cold that wasn't just freezing, it was silencing. The kind of cold where the trees don't creak, animals vanish, and radios crackle, then die. Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion, 10th Mountain Division was conducting a winter survival and mobility drill just outside of Indian Lake. Nothing exotic, just high-altitude recon, terrain navigation, and deep cold bivouac testing. Routine training, they said. Until it wasn't. 3 hours into the movement, just past Grid 18 TQ 7441, they lost contact. Radio blackout, zero transmission. Command chalked it up to elevation and weather. But then, the seismic sensors kicked in. Just west of their last ping, near a trail system locals called the Devil's Spine. USGS recorders picked up brief, concentrated tremors, movement. Heavy movement, not tectonic, more like upright impact. No quake, no landslide, but something massive, shifting under snow. Within 6 hours, the QRF team was deployed from Fort Drum. The original team re-established contact 41 minutes before recovery. When they returned, they said nothing. No injuries, no visible panic. But something had changed. Their lead, Sergeant Foster, filed a cryptic statement. Terrain encountered, non-standard. Avoid re-entry during melt. That phrase stuck because the report attached to Bravo Company's grid location had a strange edit in the mission log. Location revised after contact. Not after movement, not after weather, after contact. But with what? Satellite review was scrubbed. Civilian hiking reports in that region for the next 18 months were mysteriously blocked, and multiple FOIA requests returned the same result. No record found. Yet deep in local archives, especially among Iroquois elders, one phrase echoed across generations. Stonecoats, rock-skinned giants, said to roam the peaks during winter. Feared not because they attacked, but because they watched. Legends say they emerged when the snow was deep, the silence was thick, and people forgot what light felt like. They were cold incarnate, not beasts, but watchers. And here's the thing. Every culture has stories, but the Iroquois stories were always tied to the Adirondacks. Right where Bravo Company vanished off comms, right where something left footprints in frozen moss, later airbrushed from the debrief. What they found wasn't human, and it wasn't alone. The military doesn't just train in remote forests by coincidence, especially not in the Adirondacks. Thousands of square miles of hard, freezing terrain where radio fails and satellites get scattered signals. That's exactly the kind of place they choose when they don't want anyone watching. Fort Drum sits on the north edge, home to the U.S. Army's 10th Mountain Division, cold weather warriors. These are the guys who scale cliffs in snowshoes, hump packs through waist-deep powder, and hold the line in temps that freeze gun oil. Then there's Camp Ethan Allen, Vermont, just across the state line. It's where the Army sends snipers to disappear into tree lines, and Green Berets to learn how to move without being seen or heard for days at a time. Between these two sites, deep in the Adirondack spine, sits a corridor the Army used during a 1999 cold weather joint operation. Most people never heard about it. That's because it wasn't designed for the press. It was called Exercise Winter Forge. Officially, it was labeled a high-altitude search and rescue simulation. Unofficially, it looked a lot more like deep recon survival, off-grid movement, extended duration cold exposure, and wilderness tracking. 2 units were deployed, 1 element of Army Rangers from 2nd Battalion, 75th Regiment, and a company of 10th Mountains Light Infantry. They were dropped in over a 4-day window with staggered comm schedules. Their AO, Copper Ridge, a frozen line of hills that cuts through old-growth forest and granite plateaus. Locals won't even hike it in spring. They say the compass goes dead halfway through. Something about mineral interference, or that's the official excuse. Midway through the operation, one of the recon teams broke comms. Radio silence for 47 minutes. That's not a glitch. That's a blackout. Protocol says when a unit goes dark, you scramble QRF, quick reaction force. But not this time. A single Black Hawk was dispatched, no gunner crew, just one medic and a log officer. They touched down near the last known grid and extracted the team, quietly. Only one man was injured. A fractured clavicle, reportedly caused by a fall during rappelling. But here's where it gets weird. The terrain they were in had no vertical drop. That same soldier, Specialist Gavin M. Cates, was rotated out 3 days later and reassigned to an intel unit in North Carolina. And the after-action log? Redacted. No mention of contact, no radio transcript. Just one sentence in the ops debrief. Navigation disrupted by topographic anomaly. But Ranger sources later claimed the team's gear was pulled for biological testing. Every thermal scope, every coat, even the damn boots. And when they returned to base, none of them spoke during debrief. That's not just cold weather discipline, that's something else. Something they weren't cleared to talk about. And whatever happened out there, it wasn't part of the simulation. Because by day 3, new maps were issued to the rest of the units. Grid lines revised. Route markings rerouted away from Copper Ridge entirely. No explanation, just a red boundary. And the words, restricted, environmental hazard. But ask any infantryman who trained there that year, no one remembers any contamination drills, only snow and silence. The snow was falling sideways. Whiteout conditions. Wind cutting through layers of Gore-Tex in the fleece like it wasn't even there. You couldn't see more than 20 feet. It was the kind of night the 10th Mountain Division trained for. And exactly the kind of night that could kill you if you got cocky. Specialist Langley had point. M4 carbine slung tight across his chest, snowshoes crunching through the drifts. His Moley ruck carried survival gear, rations, a thermal blanket, and extra mags. Blanks, because this was supposed to be an exercise. His ANPVS-14 night vision monocular cut through the dark just enough to make out the lead sled, where Sergeant Danner kept checking the GPS. They were somewhere east of Copper Ridge. Deep recon under blackout protocol. No comms unless absolutely necessary. The whole point of Exercise Winter Forge was to simulate long-range survival and search and rescue under Arctic conditions. No vehicles, no roads, just 5 men, a sled, and 30 miles of frozen nothing. Then they saw the deer. Half buried under snow, its chest cavity was wide open. But it wasn't torn like a bear kill. It was cut, precise. Ribs cracked outward, organs gone. No tracks, no drag marks, just the deer, still steaming. Langley called it in. Danner gave the nod. They moved on. About a mile later, the seismic sensors picked something up. Sergeant Brenner carried the portable ground unit, standard issue for terrain movement detection. The unit blinked twice, then again. Heavy movement. 2 miles northeast. No engines. No aircraft. Whatever it was walking. They altered course. Around 200 hours, the trail narrowed into a gully. Snow fell harder. That's when Private Keener spotted the etchings, carved directly into a slab of granite. 3 intersecting arcs, about a foot wide each. Not erosion, not natural, and definitely not NATO. Langley stepped forward, running a gloved hand over the grooves. They were smooth, weathered, but not ancient. Something had put them there with intent. Then the radio flared. It was Adams, the forward scout. "Contact, can't. It's looking at me, too tall," then static. Danner froze. Every man dropped low, forming a defensive posture. NVGs scanned the tree line. Nothing. They called Adams again. No reply. The fog rolled in harder. Visibility dropped to 10 feet. The radios popped once more. Then silence. And that's when they saw it. At the edge of the ridge, something was standing still. At first glance, it looked like a statue. Stone-colored, 8, maybe 9 feet tall. Broad shoulders, no visible face. Just a silhouette blending into the rocks. Langley raised his carbine. The thing moved. Not fast, just enough. It stepped sideways, then stopped. No sound, no crunch of snow. It was as if the ground itself swallowed its weight. Keener muttered, "Is that a statue?" Nobody answered. Danner made the call to retreat. Quiet, controlled. No lights. They backed down the slope. Halfway through, the radios all died at once. Then something let out a low, guttural hum. It didn't come from ahead. It came from behind. Langley turned just in time to see a blur of motion tear through the trees. Adams came stumbling through the snow, face bloody, one arm dangling useless. "It picked me up," he gasped, one hand like a toy. Then he collapsed. Brenner applied first aid. Langley scanned the ridgeline. That's when he saw it again. It had a snowmobile in its hand, one of the transport sleds from an earlier drop, maybe 300 pounds, fully loaded. It lifted it like it weighed nothing and dropped it into a ravine. The team broke contact. Extraction was called. Emergency code flashed on IR beacon. 20 minutes later, a CH-47 Chinook came roaring over the treetops, rotors hammering the silence. They loaded Adams first, then the rest. No one said a word. The flight crew didn't ask questions, just gave him heat packs and hot water. The debrief the next day was brief. Environmental hazard, ice structure collapse, 1 injury. That's all the report said. The logs from the seismic tracker, redacted. The GPS data, gone. Langley kept one thing though, a photo, just one. Taken on his NVG cam, grainy, washed in green. But in the distance, on that ridge, the silhouette stood just clear enough. Not stone, not statue, and definitely not alone. The official logs from Exercise Winter Forge? Archived as incomplete. That's not unusual on its own. In high-altitude cold weather drills, units often run into tech failures. Batteries die, radios freeze, GPS loses signal. But this wasn't weather. And anyone who was there knew it. Because there's something the logs don't show. An anonymous former ranger who participated in Winter Forge later came forward, quietly, through a closed-door interview with a veteran-run podcast. He never gave his name, but his voice shook the entire time. He said he still couldn't sleep near forests, still couldn't be anywhere without clear skies overhead. "I'll never go north of Albany again," he said. Something was up there with us, and we weren't trained to deal with it. When asked why the event wasn't reported fully, he hesitated, then said just 5 words. It wasn't ours to report, and that might have been it. Another whisper from the field, ignored. But in 2007, a Civilian Freedom of Information Act request was filed, an attempt to access Exercise Winter Forge's after-action review. The response? 23 pages, all blacked out. Every section involving Unit 3-2B, the one that lost comms near Copper Ridge. Redacted. The name of the injured soldier? Blacked out. The GPS coordinates where seismic anomalies were recorded? Blacked out. But there was one page they forgot to scrub. A time-stamped mention of a USGS seismic monitor tripped near Colden Lake. January 24th, 1999. Magnitude 9.2. That's a massive underground event. But there was no quake reported in the Adirondacks that day. No damage, no aftershocks, nothing but that lone record, and a few odd reports that followed months later. In the summer of 1999, a civilian hiker, Paul Ledbetter, was camping near Colden Lake with 2 friends. He came back shaken, said they'd found a print in the granite shale. 5 toes, 19 inches long. Not a boot, not a bear. Paul said he tried to take a photo, but the disposable camera jammed twice. He made a rubbing with charcoal instead, and that's the only thing that made it back. Rangers dismissed it, said it was weather erosion. But not everyone was so quick to brush it off. Because that same month, 2 separate families in the hamlet of Keene Valley reported what they called stonemen. Not statues, not hallucinations. They said their dogs refused to go into the woods. They heard knocking sounds on rock at night. And one morning, a hunter said he saw a figure cross the trailhead at Porter Mountain. Broad-shouldered, gray. It didn't make a sound. Before that, there hadn't been a single Tsauer stoneman report in that region for over 80 years. And suddenly, within 6 months of a classified military encounter, there were 3. Coincidence, maybe. But what the logs don't say, what the blacked-out pages won't admit. The locals already have a name for what lives in those woods. And they say it never left. It just waits until the snow falls again. What the Rangers saw that night didn't fit into any known category. It wasn't animal, wasn't human, and definitely wasn't terrain. But in the weeks that followed, the questions only got louder. Cryptozoologists started crawling over the few leaked fragments from Winter Forge, matching signs and behavior patterns to older case files. Cases from Alaska, Canada, even as far as Mongolia. But the ones that stood out most came from our own backyard. Retired military specialists, some with experience in Arctic ops, offered a theory. They weren't sure what exactly the Rangers had faced, but they didn't think it was the first time the military had seen it. According to them, there'd been other encounters. Scattered, rare, always deep winter, always in isolated terrain. One classified as an anthropomorphic seismic incident during a 1978 training op in Yukon. Another, unconfirmed, near Metkatahdin in the 80s, logged under subsurface anomaly mobile. The pattern? Cold climates, mountains, snowpacks thick enough to swallow a man whole and deep enough to cover whatever might live underneath. Some believe the Stonecoats aren't mythical at all, just ancient. Glacial age remnants, massive, upright hominids, biologically adapted to silence, cold, and stone. The rock-like skin, not armor, just dense dermal plating hardened by ice and evolution. They live underground, the theory says, migrating under tectonic fault lines, coming up only in extreme winters to hunt or observe. And there's a twist. A smaller group of specialists believe they might not be relics, but something newer, some kind of engineered hybrid. Project long buried. The details are scarce, just whispers of adaptive tundra sentries, part of an old DARPA concept tied to terrain defense in the 1970s. The paperwork's gone, the names are gone, but the footprint patterns match. And then there's the third belief, not from scientists, not from soldiers, but from the people who were here first. Several Iroquois elders have spoken quietly, cautiously, about what they call the Last Watchers. To them, the Stonecoats aren't monsters, but guardians. ancient protectors left behind after a great war, meant to keep balance between what's above and what sleeps below. They say the creatures don't seek us out. We just get too close. So if they're not attacking, if they're not invading, why did the military label them a moving seismic event? Why classify a biological sighting as geological? Unless whatever's beneath them moves too. And what we saw wasn't the threat. It was just the warning. What if giants never left? What if they just learned to hide better? Think about it. Cold terrain, remote ridges, seismic events without earthquakes, and a unit of trained soldiers with no reason to lie. All walking away shaken, quiet, and sworn to silence. We've spent this entire investigation digging through redacted files, ranger testimony, native oral histories, seismic anomalies, and training logs that just don't add up. So now I'll ask you, were these men victims of mass hysteria under cold stress? Or the first military unit to survive an encounter with something our ancestors warned us about? Let's say, just for a moment, the Stonecoat legends were never stories. What if they were reports? The Iroquois didn't describe these things out of fantasy. They documented them. And when their trails crossed into European colonial land, the stories didn't disappear. They multiplied. Then, centuries later, trained rangers in the 10th Mountain Division come face to face with something that breaks calms, shakes the ground, and lifts a snowmobile like it weighs nothing. That's not myth. That's field intel. Still think it was just a bear? I want to hear what you think. Drop a comment below. Tell me, were these men tracking a relic from the last ice age? Or was something tracking them? And if you made it this far, tell me where you're watching from. City, state, or country. Drop it in the comments so we know how far the Phantom Army reaches. Make sure you're subscribed. Turn on that bell so you don't miss what we uncover next. And if you're part of this community, help keep these stories alive by sharing this video. Because history doesn't bury the truth. It hides it behind red tape, behind blacked out logs, behind need to know. And we're done waiting for permission. Wartime Phantoms, over and out.